Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another short war video, and today we have major news coming out of Crimea that last night the Ukrainians conducted an air assault on a Russian airfield in the Crimea area, and it has caused major damage to that base, and the Russians are experiencing some pretty heavy military losses. And we're also learning that the situation in the Middle East is still heating up even right now, and there appears to be no signs of de-escalation. And finally, we are getting word that a major $61 billion Ukraine aid package is being put up in the House of Representatives in the USA, and it looks like that might get passed by Saturday. So some promising news for Ukraine. And with that, we're jumping into our first article of the day, which goes to us on Twitter at It's the Enforcer. And here we can see loud explosions were witnessed at the Russian Dzhankoy military airfield in Russian-occupied Crimea last night. And the military airfield is the main logistics hub for the Russian army, and it's also home to attack helicopters. Let's go ahead and take a look at this footage right here and see the extent of the damage. And right here you can hear the sirens going off in the background, and there is an explosion which is heating up quite quickly in the distance. It's even got a strobe effect going on with it, and the duration is long. And you might have been able to hear that in the background just then. That was actually some ammunition or some munition of some sort, which was detonating inside probably of a storage facility, maybe a shed or a warehouse of some sort, or maybe even a hangar. But as you can see, a very big explosion, and that is definitely not going to be minor damage. And in our next post here from Status 6 Military and Conflict News, we can see that it looks like at least 3 transporter erector launchers, also known as TELs, of the S-400 surface-to-air missile system could have been destroyed as a result of Ukrainian strikes on the Dzhankoy airbase in the northern part of Crimea last night. And in this photo here, it is very kindly by Status 6 labeled 1, 2, and 3. These are allegedly the 3 transporter erector launchers which were destroyed last night, and these are crucial components of the S-400 missile system which Russia uses to launch air attacks on Ukraine. So it looks like all 3 of those are wiped out. And this was a photo which was published by the Ukrainian military as well. There has been no independent verification of it, but I'm going to take the Ukrainians' word for it. This looks like the damage from the airfield as well. This looks like the official damage, and this is quite big indeed, and a big loss for the Russians. But moving on to our next post here, we have one from Ukraine front line, and we're also learning that a Russian Mi-8 helicopter was destroyed in Russia, says Ukrainian intelligence. And according to the intel, on April 17th of 2024 this year, Russian Mi-8 transport helicopter was destroyed at the Crimea airfield in the city of Samara, and the aggressor used the helicopter in the war to transport weapons and personnel. And like they said here, the cost of this helicopter can be from $10 to $15 million. So this is something right here that was destroyed allegedly today. Another Mi-8 loss for Russia, and now they have another $10 or $15 million aircraft that they're going to have to try to scramble to replace in the midst of a bad economic situation inside the Russian mainland. So it's good to see that the Russian aircraft losses are still mounting quite quickly, and even though this is not the biggest catch of the war, all of them add up, and it's going to cost Russia a lot of money to get all this stuff repaired and fixed, and if replaced. So with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to your first Squawk, who says Russia has announced a total withdrawal of troops from Nagorno-Karabakh, says Politico. And this is another big win for Ukraine. The troops from Nagorno-Karabakh are withdrawn completely, says the Russian Ministry of Defense, which is obviously a sign that they are having some pretty bad manpower issues, and also probably some cowardice as well, because a lot of the guys on the front line simply do not want to fight. And it's sounding to me like the demoralization of the Russian troops is really starting to set in as the meat grinder continues on. So a good piece of news for Ukraine there as well. And moving on to our next post, we have another one from Ukraine front line. And we can see in this video, a Russian refinery after the Ukrainian drone arrival, it smashed this refinery quite terribly. And we're not told the name of the refinery. I'm assuming it's one of the ones that have been hit over the last couple of weeks. And as you can see, there is nothing but devastation here. Absolute devastation. The worker even seems devastated. He's in disbelief that this is even happening. And that this refinery is probably not going to be working for some time. This thing is out of action. And just a testament to how powerful these new Ukrainian drones are that are being used to strike inside of the Russian mainland. And one thing that Ukraine is having is a bit of an ammunition shortage right now, which is causing some hiccups on the front line here and there, and also some issues with their air defense in the homeland of Ukraine. But one thing is for certain, Ukraine has not let up whatsoever in attacking Crimea, which is Russian occupied temporarily, and also attacking inside of mainland Russia. They are still bringing the fight right to Russia, even though they are having some ammunition shortages. shortages, so Ukraine is not out of the fight just yet, and with that aid package coming up, they're going to be right back in it very soon. But moving on here to our next post, we have one from Null Reports, and we are seeing a close-up video of the Blyatmobile, which was used recently to attack Krasnohorivka, and although it looks silly, they said it works. And honestly, I have to disagree with this. This is actually the second version of the Blyatmobile, which is this abomination right here, which we'll look at in just a minute. The first one was destroyed pretty quickly, and the Russians like to show it off like it was a piece of art, but it got destroyed on the battlefield really rapidly. So I think it looks silly, and also I think it doesn't really work either. But let's take a look at the video. And as you can see there, I'm going to have to mute this. There's music in it, but this thing is put together with, it looks like corrugated metal on the top and random sheets of metal on the sides and also the back. There's even like a mud flap piece of metal right here. And we have actually nicknamed this thing the Russian Haus, after the German Maus. And as you can see, this thing is just terrible all the way around. I really have nothing left to say about it. It's just horrible. And there's really no way to explain that away, except for Russia is super desperate for equipment to resort to doing things like that. But anyways, moving on to our next post here, we have one from Walter Bloomberg. And switching gears just a little bit, we're moving out of the Ukraine conflict for just a moment, and we're moving to the Middle East to cover the Iran-Israel situation. And as we can see here, striking Iran's nuclear facilities is still on the table, says ex-Mossad intelligence chief, according to Sky News. And we get a little bit more detail right here. It says a former official at the Israeli spy agency says targeting nuclear facilities in Iran is among the options on the table as Israel decides how to respond to Saturday's attack. And meanwhile, Iran's president has warned that the tiniest move against Iran could bring the most fierce response possible in return. So like we've been saying for days, the big question here is whether or not Iran has a nuclear weapon. We know for a fact they are developing one. We were told by U.S. intelligence about a week ago that there is about 3 days to a few weeks left on Iran's schedule to actually develop a functional primitive nuclear warhead, and this is something that Israel is strongly considering to wipe out because they don't want them to get nuclear weapons, because if Iran gets them, that puts Iran on a level playing field with Israel, which gives that corrupt and rogue regime the ability to potentially wipe Israel out. So I think here this is something that they're weighing into the equation quite a bit. I think Israel might go ahead and take the step to knock those things out, and it might be a pretty smart move, even though it probably will trigger a regional war. But that's just my opinion. If you disagree with me, put your opinion down in the comments below. But with that, we're moving on to our next one here, which also goes to Walter Bloomberg. And we learned in this post that senior U.S. officials said it would be hard to repeat Saturday night's success if Iran decides to strike Israel again. And this is something here that I would like some more confirmation on. This appears to be alluding that Israel might not be able to keep up with its air defense like it did during that first Iranian attack that occurred a few nights ago. I'm not really sure if that's the case because the Iron Dome is a very capable system, and Israel also has replenishments to make sure that they have more ammunition to put into that system to make sure it's not running out. So I'm not really sure what this means, but a senior U.S. official is allegedly saying this behind the scenes, so we'll have to keep an eye on it. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to Fitux News. And we can also see that the pressure is mounting on Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu. After speaking with foreign ministers of Germany and the UK, it has caused Netanyahu to say, quote unquote, "They have all kinds of suggestions and advice. I appreciate it, but I want to make it clear Israel will make its own decisions, and the state of Israel will do everything necessary to defend itself." So as we can see here, the West is trying to basically de-escalate the situation. They don't want a regional war to break out, but we've even gotten reports that Netanyahu is ignoring Western leaders' phone calls to avoid being told to basically back down and don't respond to Iran to avoid that war from breaking out. So it seems pretty certain at this point that whatever the West's advice may be, it looks like Israel and also Netanyahu is pretty much going to make their own path here, and they're going to respond to it the way they want to, probably with more force than the West is probably hoping for. But then again, Israel is a sovereign state, and that is their right to choose. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to Apex News on Twitter, and we're learning from the Wall Street Journal today, citing U.S. officials, that Israel's response to Iran's attack is likely to come soon. And I believe this is likely the case because the War Cabinet in Israel has been meeting a couple different times in the last couple of days, and there has been a confirmation that Israel has decided to strike Iran directly, but we aren't sure as to the level of the attack, and we aren't sure as to the timing of it either. And Israel has even gotten to the point where they're not informing the United States behind the scenes of what their plans actually are. So we're all in the dark at the moment. We're left guessing when this attack will occur, but when it does happen, I think all hell's going to break loose, and we're going to see that very loud and clear. But with that, that is all of our Israeli-Iran news. So we are now moving back to Ukraine for just a moment to go over some very positive news. And we're hearing from the Kyiv Post that the House of Representatives in the United States has published the content of the bill on aid to Ukraine, which allocates over $60 billion and obligates the provision of ATACMS long-range missiles upon its adoption. So this is a huge bill, and if this thing passes, Ukraine will be saved in 2024. So to me, this is so crucial to get this bill passed because this is massive aid indeed. To put it in perspective, I believe the USA has roughly put about $100 billion so far into Ukraine's defense. And that's a rough number. Obviously, it's a little bit higher or lower, but $60 billion in one bill is huge. And if this thing can get passed, it is all in the bag for Ukraine, in my opinion, because they can outlast the Russians during 2024, and then going into 2025, the Russians start losing equipment and they can't replace it, and then that's when Ukraine swoops in, pushes the Russians back, and then I think that's where we're going to see a Ukrainian victory. But moving on to our next post here, we have one from Null Reports, and we're actually learning the contents of the draft text of the bill, and the key highlights are this. It says the bill obliges the U.S. president to hand over ATACMS to Ukraine as soon as possible after it enters into force, and in total, $61 billion will be allocated, of which $23 billion to replenish DoD stocks. And this is one part right here which was a little bit contentious. It says assistance is planned to be provided on a loan basis, which Zelensky has said that he is willing to accept. And we're also seeing here that confiscation of Russian assets is expected to cover the cost in the future. And also the bill requires the Pentagon and State Department to provide clear U.S. strategy for Ukraine within 45 days. So overall, this will be the saving grace for Ukraine. And to be honest with you, I personally don't care if it's a loan or it's just simply a gift, because at this point, it doesn't really matter because Ukraine's survival depends on getting this aid, and regardless of what it is, a loan, a gift, whatever, Ukraine needs the money. That's the bottom line. If they need to pay back a loan, whatever, it's better for Ukraine to pay back a loan than to simply to cease to exist as a country. So I think overall this is very good, and I have hope that this might actually pass on Saturday night. So we'll have to keep an eye on that very closely. But with that, that is actually our last piece of news for the day. And I hope you found this video informative, and if you have, please press the like button and subscribe to the channel as well, because that greatly helps grow the channel, which helps us get the news out there, and we appreciate that very much. And also, if you want to support our work financially, we do have a Patreon page, and the link is in the description below this video, where you can go and sign up and support us financially, and that also helps keep the operation going and supports our work. And once again, thank you all for watching. Please be sure to join us at 10 p.m. Eastern tonight for another night of war news. And obviously, we still are waiting for that Iran and also Israel escalation, which should be coming soon, and we'll be covering that live as it happens. So with that, we'll see you all tonight, and bye-bye for now.